Hello, I'm Louis Wierenga and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. In what seems to be another exercise in plausible deniability, Russians may have stirred up a storm across the Baltic, as NATO vows to boost its presence there after a mysterious undersea cable incident, which, in plain English, means a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker is believed to have deliberately gone on an anchor-dragging rampage, severing a chunky power cable connecting Estonia and Finland before itself being dragged off for investigation. So is Russia about to dispel the idyllic vision of the Baltic as the NATO lake, or can NATO reinforce this idea by hitting back hard? Joining us here today is Louis Wierenga, lecturer at the Baltic Defense College. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
So let's begin with the latest revelations. Not only is this ship a part of the Shadow Fleet, apparently, according to investigators, it was carrying equipment designed for espionage. What do you make of that? Is this a surprise?
Well, no, it's not a surprise. I mean, Russia's amping this up. And as the Finnish President Alexander Stubb said, 3 cases in 1 year cannot be a coincidence. And I think this is the first time where allies have said enough is enough. And this is a significant amping up of presence that shows NATO vigilance and NATO resolve in the region. Now, we shouldn't be surprised because I think what Moscow's done in the region since 2022 with hybrid attacks is that they up the ante and increase in increments each time a little bit to see what they can get away with and how allies are going to respond. And although the Kremlin has denied any part in this recent attack on critical undersea infrastructure, they're not taking responsibility, but they're very likely getting the message. And the message was sent pretty loud and clear based on how quickly allies have responded.
But will this message be a sufficient signal when it comes to the Russian activity there? There are several unresolved issues, right? For example, who is going to pay for the increased NATO activity? Do you think Western countries will actually be capable of taking one step further and saying, okay, we actually have to increase our presence, this is expensive, we're going to take this money away from the Russian frozen sovereign funds? And I don't mean the proceeds, just like it was done before to benefit Ukraine, but actually from the funds themselves. Up to now, somehow these funds are considered to be off limits when it comes to confiscation. Will this change, do you think?
I'm not sure, but I would expect that it would, because I don't think either side wants a direct military confrontation. I mean, Article 4 could, in principle, be invoked. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's been discussed that it could happen, but I don't think that it will happen. But I think that anything that is in the realm of the political is possible to try and entice Moscow not to continue with these hybrid attacks. But the issue is plausible deniability, even though that plausible deniability is very much shrinking. And, you know, if you look at how quickly this has happened, I mean, allies have been asked to spend much more, 2.5 to 3%. Is likely going to be the call at the next NATO summit. I mean, incoming U.S. president has even said 5%. That's highly unlikely for political purposes. But the point is that 2% is no longer an option given the current security environment. And Secretary General Rutte has gotten behind this and said allies need to spend more. And there's an increased understanding that's permeating across the alliance that, yes, we do need to spend more because the security environment has drastically changed. Now, that varies from country to country based on geographic location. But if you look at what's happened, I mean, this incident happened on Christmas Day. Finland and Estonia responded very quickly. Estonia has a naval operation right now. Finnish police have responded very, very quickly. And Secretary General Rutte on Thursday promised to give NATO support to Estonia and Finland. And since Rutte has made that post on X, Finnish President Alexander Stubb has come out and said that the Estonian-Finnish request for backup has already been responded to. There was a rapid response from NATO, and I expect to see more allies sending ships to the vicinity And this is precisely the kind of message that needs to be sent to Moscow, that if these situations keep arising, I mean, a couple of times are no longer a coincidence, especially if anchors are being dragged along the bottom of the sea. So if these types of situation arises, allies will respond, and they will do so quickly, vigilantly, and unanimously.
So regrettably, the question of infrastructure is not the only problem we are facing in the Baltic, right? We have seen instances of GPS jamming, and now this becomes an especially important topic in the context of the tragedy of the Azerbaijani airliner that was most likely hit over Russia and then has managed to get to an airport in Kazakhstan before plummeting to the ground. Now, of course, this aircraft was most likely destroyed or damaged by a Russian missile, not by GPS jamming, but GPS jamming was involved along the way. Do you think we have to wait until something like that happens here in the Baltic before taking further measures against this activity which the Russians are conducting from Kaliningrad?
Well, let's hope not. I mean, that's precisely the point that I was making, is that the Russians seem to do this in increments and test how much they can get away with and what type of response measures are going to come. What's going to be said? How quickly is it going to be acted upon? Which countries are involved outside of the immediate vicinity? We have a new Secretary General in NATO now, so it's probably something that they're going to be looking at. And I think that, one of the things that Finland has done differently this time is that they immediately responded. Alexander Stubb held an emergency meeting of the Foreign and Security Committee, and immediately after that, there was a press conference, and he stated that Finland has the situation under control, and they do. Finland was able to seize this particular ship. They brought it to port, and the Finnish police boarded the ship and started interviewing the crew, who apparently have been reasonably responsive. And in previous instances, these ships were not boarded, and one of them, I think it was last year, was even able to continue sailing. And further to that, Finland has sent a ship to the site to start assessing what's happening. And the president of Finland said that it's too soon to draw conclusions as to why this happened, but he said that we know who did it. So this type of response might change the calculus of Moscow. We don't know. It's going to take a lot for them to stop hybrid attacks, because the response is different than a solely kinetic attack. So let's hope that this is the final wake-up call before a situation like you just described happens, which is even arguably more serious, and then it's a little bit too late.
So this clearly is a step in the right direction, but psychologically, do you think that Russia will understand anything short of a language of force? And I will, of course, make a reference to a rather different but related incident that happened a couple of years ago between Russia and Turkey. You surely know which one I'm talking about. A Russian jet was simply blasted from the air following stern warnings received from Turkey after violating airspace. Do you think it is only through such gestures that we would be able to communicate to Russia, don't mess with us, because we're not going to mess around?
Yeah, I mean, that's the language that they understand, and people in this region know that arguably better than anyone else, aside from Ukrainians, on par with Ukrainians, and that's true. It seems that they don't get the message, and even they laugh and wag off these stern warnings about being deeply concerned and monitoring the situation closely. We play by different rules because we are liberal democracies that seek to maintain peace, but we're getting to the point where what can you do when these types of aggressive actions happen that are dangerous to the security environment, dangerous to infrastructure, and dangerous to people? So I think that they understand that language in a much different sense than the language of pure diplomacy. And I've said before on this program and elsewhere that negotiating in good faith with Moscow is not something that you can do. They do not respect Western liberal democracies, and that is very clear by their words, and is especially clear by their actions.
And also a quick reminder to our viewers, the incident we've mentioned, that was a NATO country shooting down a Russian jet. Did World War III start by any chance? Well, clearly it did not. We are still here, we're still talking, and we're not actually dealing with nuclear fallout. So my question is this: what kind of measures should we take at this stage? Do you think that we should be deploying drone escorts to all of the Russian tankers making their way across the sea, continue sanctions also? Which of these measures is going to be the most effective? Should we simply increase surveillance to the point that the Russians will not be able to do anything without us knowing, preferably in advance?
I think we should have a combination. Sanctions definitely should be increased at the fullest level, but also drone escorts and really seriously amping up a NATO presence in the Baltic Sea region with more ships from as wide an array of allied countries as possible. And I would even say increasing troop presence on the ground as well, and making sure that we maintain cognitive superiority and that we maintain, that governments and militaries maintain a solid line of communication with civilians, getting ready to pre-bunk any type of information warfare that permeates the information domain, and really making sure that, we're ahead of the STRATCOM that goes along with an increased maritime presence, because maritime security is becoming a center of gravity. I mean, you can't really take away the land domain because of the border that's shared by the Baltic states, but this tends to be where a lot of the hybrid activity is occurring. And so I think that this is a turning point, and when NATO and when allied countries send more to help allies in the Baltic Sea region, that sends a point. And like you made earlier, when the incident happened between Turkey and Russia, no, World War III did not happen, because I don't believe that Russia is ready or willing to get into a kinetic confrontation with NATO. And we need to make sure that they're reminded of that. And by, having this kind of united but, all-encompassing response in the region is going to be a strong and clear message. And who knows if that's going to stop the hybrid threats. But I think the more that we show that we're serious and that we are willing to defend every inch of allied territory, including in the maritime domain, the more the message will get across.
And of course, the situation will continue to be rather complicated due to the presence of the Kaliningrad exclave, but that perhaps is a matter for another conversation altogether. Until then, Louis Wierenga was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us for more latest news and updates.